important, hope. And really inspired by what I've heard this morning. So I want to move on because, well, we are a little bit behind on time. We're not doing too bad. So we've got three more presentations, and delighted to have Annette Peart and her colleagues from Australia, who are going to talk about the experience of family members and friends attending Breakthrough. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Annette.
Thank you. And I'm attempting to share my file with Teams that I haven't done before. So I guess I'm going into open share tray. Is that the best way to do it?
That's what you do. Open share tray. If your slides are up, you can just put your mouse onto that and it should open. And Richard, thanks for that offer. I still don't have chat. So any questions, raise your hand through chat. I'm going to need Richard to help me out and read out the chat for me.
I'll do that at the end of each talk, Ed. I'll do that at the end of each talk.
Excellent. Thank you. So, and that's
okay, so I seem to have some difficulty using, because I'm using this on my desktop, and it's telling me that there's no files for me to share.
So you sent your PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Before, right. Sari, are you there? And if so, can you show Annette's presentation, please?
Fabulous. Thank you.
If that doesn't work, I've probably got it. But no, there we are.
Beautiful.
So what you'll have to do, therefore, is unfortunately say next slide, please, each time.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you so much. That's great. I'm not a Teams person. I'm a Zoom person. So I'm all messed up. But so thank you. That's great. You can do that. Welcome. Well, as Catherine said in the first session, welcome to me. But I'm very happy to be here and presenting the research that I and my colleagues did. And I'm also really happy that Rob Campbell is here because he'll be able to answer some questions about Breakthrough. So next slide, please. So firstly, I want to acknowledge that I'm presenting today on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. These lands were stolen and sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also wish to acknowledge, and we can stay on that slide, that's fine. And this is from my colleagues at Shark, and we've talked a little bit about Shark today, acknowledging the individual and collective expertise of those with the living or lived experience of mental health, alcohol and other drug issues, and recognising their contribution to this research and to this conference. Next slide, thanks. Here's an outline of what I'll be talking about today. Introduce the Breakthrough program, which is not my program. I'm a researcher and Breakthrough belongs to other people such as Rob. Introduce the research project, what we did, what we found, and what this means. So next slide, thanks. So Breakthrough, just to set a bit of a context, I'm sitting in Melbourne, or Naarm, in Victoria in Australia, so right down the southeast corner of a map of Australia. So the Victorian government funds Breakthrough, which is a program for family, friends and partners of people with addictive behaviours, and it offers practical strategies about how to talk to loved ones about their substance use, to better respond to and manage challenging behaviours and make self-care a priority. So Breakthrough aims to help family, partners, friends understand addiction and the impact it has on them and the loved one. And as a group psychoeducational and skills building program for families, it helps increase knowledge about drugs and drug use, addictive behaviours, the treatment system, how to access help and support, and strategies for self-care. The money for this program came out of Victoria's ICE action plan from around 2015, I believe, which originally focused on methamphetamine or ICE use. And it's evolved to now focus on addictive behaviours more broadly. And it's been delivered to over 5,000 people since that time, and in fact, it might even be closer to 7,000. Originally designed as face-to-face, it was adapted to online due to the COVID restrictions. So it enabled people to participate, more people to participate, especially from regional areas. Now, I've included the website for Breakthrough. So if you go to that website, you will find more information and more, such as booklets and resources for family members. Next slide, please. So this research came about through funding from Australia's Alcohol and Drug Foundation, and the funding was for existing services to partner with researchers to strengthen the evidence of programs that focus on delivery of information or support for family members and friends. So the Breakthrough program, existing feedback indicated that after participants do break through, they felt less stigmatised and increased their confidence to better address their family issues, and they were likely to use the strategies. But we didn't really know anything more than that. We didn't know how, I guess, the effect on their daily lives as an affected family member. And it was really, this data was from post-session feedback forms, which didn't give participants an opportunity to provide more in-depth responses. So we formed a steering group and project groups with representatives from Turning Point, which is one of Australia's leading addiction treatment research and education centre, SHARC, or Self-Help Addiction Resource Centre, and Monash University, which is where I'm from. We worked together to design the aims of the research project and the best ways to optimise our data collection, which was for a very short time-limited project. Next slide, thanks. So the aim of the project was to generate evidence of the role of Breakthrough for participants by exploring the experiences and outcomes of family members who attended Breakthrough. Next slide, thanks. So firstly, we looked at the evaluation data that I spoke to before and looked at some of those responses to the questions to get a bit of an insight into what participants were saying, and that helped us develop a semi-structured interview guide. To recruit participants, information about the research and a link to an online expression of interest form was shared with attendees at the end of each Breakthrough session held between July and December in 2021. So 30 attendees expressed interest in an interview, 2 people declined and 7 were unable to complete the interview in our data collection period. So we ended up with 21 participants. And I really hope that those numbers add up. I always worry that the numbers don't add up to I think that's right. So the interviews were by telephone and recorded and transcribed verbatim by a professional transcription service. We gave everyone an identification number and pseudonyms. The interviews ranged from 15 to 35 minutes with an average time of 24 minutes. We used Brown and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis approach to analyse the interviews, which is a 6-stage process, which starts with familiarising yourself with the data and moves through decoding, generating initial themes and reviewing them, and defining and naming the themes, and then writing up. We used a number of processes to ensure this was a rigorous approach. We had enough data to show the density of evidence for each theme. We collected and analysed the data over a number of months, so we were engaged with the data over a long time, and we also met frequently during data analysis to progress the theme development. So next slide, thanks. We had 21 participants. The average age was 53. They were all women, and 14 of them lived in Melbourne and 7 lived in regional areas of Victoria. Most participants, the most common primary drug of concern for the relative was methamphetamine or ice. and most supported their child or a partner or ex-partner for an average of 5.4 years. Next slide, thanks. So we developed 3 themes from our qualitative data: experience of validation, not fixing, stepping back, and education to help make sense of experiences. Next slide, thanks. The first theme is called experience of validation. And it explains how attending breakthrough facilitated changes in participants' feelings and beliefs, a process they described as validating and destigmatizing. Participants emphasised the impact of seeing their decisions, emotions, and experiences recognised as normal and valid through Breakthrough's educational messages and peer facilitators and attendees. Stigma and destigmatisation explicitly and implicitly linked with participants' accounts of validation. They were aware that the general public often judged people experiencing addiction and their families, and that others view family members as causing their relatives' addiction or contributing to its continuation. Next slide, thanks. This is from Diane, one of the interviewees. It's helped me feel validated and reassured as a mum that sometimes tough love is what's needed and I'm doing the right thing, even when there's conflict. I didn't really believe that before I did Breakthrough because everybody I know has not had this kind of experience. I was going by my gut and I wasn't always sure my gut was right. So this helped me feel empowered, reassured that I was doing the best with what I had and that I wasn't alone. There are plenty of other regular looking parents out there that are going on with this sort of stuff. Next slide, thanks. Here's Sally. You tend to not discuss things with family or friends because of the stigma around it. So you tend to try and keep it on the low down to yourself. But when you do go in a group like that, it's very helpful because you realise it's not just you in that situation, there's a whole lot of other people. Next slide, thanks. Theme 2 is not fixing but stepping back. And this captures participants' experiences of attending Breakthrough, which allowed them to reflect critically on their approaches to their relatives' substance use and their ongoing efforts to move from a negative or a fixing approach to a positive stepping back approach. So this expands on what we found in theme 1, that attending Breakthrough helped them support a shift in their thinking. So they described their past fixing approach in negative terms, where they were attempting to control their circumstances and the impacts of the relative substance use, resulting in distress, guilt, and conflict for themselves and their family. But in the stepping back approach they described establishing boundaries, accepting their limited control over what happens, and allowing their relatives to bear the consequences of their actions. So ideas of control were important in both approaches, with fixing framed as control freak and feeling all over the place, while stepping back was framed as relinquishing control and regaining control. So next slide, thanks. Benita said, learning to let go and not wanting to fix the issue because it's not necessarily fixable. I haven't stopped, but I'm not as full on in action mode and needing to come up with solutions on behalf of my son. But I certainly have stepped back from that. And Julia, in the boundaries session, it was giving the right words to say. You are always treading on eggshells. So there were many points in that session of how to use the right words, where you can gain the person's confidence that you're stepping back and making them deal with their own problem. You won't keep stepping in for them because that's just detrimental. Next slide, thanks. Theme 3 is education to help make sense of experiences. I'm just aware of time, so I'll try and speed things up a bit. And that's looking at the role of Breakthrough in meeting their urgent and fundamental need to learn about addiction and to make sense of what they had experienced. So they came to Breakthrough feeling they didn't have the knowledge or skills to respond effectively or to cope with and process their experiences. And acquiring information and skills was the primary driver in their decisions to attend, and it was necessary to process, understand and cope with the addiction and its related impacts. And this quote from Nicole, I wanted factual information. I didn't want someone to go, there, isn't this horrible? I just want to know everything. I want to know everything about what's happening to my beautiful boy. Next slide. We also found that overall participants indicated a preference for the affordances and conveniences of online. In particular, they talked about several barriers to attending a face-to-face program, including geographic barriers, family and parenting obligations and supporting their relative, and work barriers. And they found online as non-threatening, especially for new people. They could turn the camera off or just use the chat function, or just log in and listen, choosing their own involvement. But some also noted that despite those preferences, they still described face-to-face as a warmer experience, and which allowed for a greater sense of connection. Next slide, thanks. In summary, we have Breakthrough validating their experiences, particularly through addressing stigma, and participants perceived a change in coping from fixing to stepping back. They were able to harness the collective insights of their peers and make sense of their experiences through education and support. Next slide, thanks. So what? So this research indicates that programs like Breakthrough may help alleviate the impacts of stigma. Over and above practical skills and education, Breakthrough helps facilitate a change in beliefs that allows the participants to adopt a more positive self-image in relation to identifying as an affected family member. So there's also more research that's needed to understand whether these experiences are shared by men, as well as raising the question of how we can better support male affected family members to ask for and receive support. So this information is useful to consider for anyone who is wanting to develop a program such as Breakthrough. And last slide, these are the resources that the websites you can click on for more information. There's the Breakthrough website, Turning Point, which is the Centre for Addiction Studies, and Shark as well. And that's my contact details if anyone would like to get in touch. And I'm sorry I've gone a bit over.
And that, not to worry at all, that was really fascinating. And what I heard mostly, that, you know, reducing the stigma, and Jim, I know you're going to talk about that later on today. People don't feel so alone. Really useful. Thank you. Leaves time for a few questions or comments if anybody has them.
And there's nothing except some thanks in the chat so far, Ed.
Okay, and that one of the questions, well, not more of a comment, I'll be really keen to look at the resources you have, because the more we share, the better. But I think you've raised a really interesting point. Are the experiences for men, you know, different or similar for women? And what's your initial thoughts with that? You know, because men, we know, are less likely to ask for help.
Yeah, and if Rob's still there, he might have something to say about that as well, because Rob and I, Rob being from Shark and me being from the research side, we were part of getting this project happening, and we spent some time thinking about how do we promote this more to men. What is it about men that means they don't come to a program such as Breakthrough? Sometimes men do attend, but it's often they're with their partner, their female partner. So Rob, do you have anything more you'd like to say to that? If you're there.
Look, it is a conundrum, and we have a helpline that's staffed by volunteers, and interestingly, we've got a good mix of men as a part of that. But when it comes to men engaging in groups, it does seem that the partners or the women in that relationship tend to be the mediators of passing on information, or the ones who are sort of providing that emotional connection, which then is translated to the men. So yeah, that's a collective for the brains trust of all of us across the world as to how we can do that. And I'd imagine culturally too, different communities and different relationships with men too, how that might work.
Okay.
Yeah, Ed, if I can quickly come in, about that. I mean, I think it is a totally universal thing in every country I think that we have worked in. It's not about Australian macho. There's something. Generally, men seem to find it more difficult to attend for help. Fathers are much more likely, and sometimes brothers, but male partners are particularly unlikely. Two other questions or comments. There's a question from Pauline in New Zealand. Have you published anything yet on this study? And if not, are you planning on it? And something from Steve from New Zealand as well about the parallels across working with family members, because obviously there are a huge number of parallels between the work that you've been doing and the work that we do with 5-step method regarding the importance of information, normalization, validation of family members' experiences, how to help them think about and learning how to respond differently. So these common factors are obviously of great importance. Have you published anything yet?
Yes, it's sitting on an editor's desk with a journal at the moment.
Good.
So yes, but I will plug, I don't know if anyone can access this. You might be able to, if you go to the Turning Point website, which is turningpoint.org.au, Rob and I are actually doing a webinar on Tuesday lunchtime, Melbourne time, but I think the recording of that will be available on the Turning Point website in a couple of weeks. And we've got more time to talk about Breakthrough and how we did this project and some additional findings as well. So I just encourage anyone to maybe have a look on the Turning Point website.
Excellent. Thanks, Annette. And that's the power of this, sharing resources and tools. Excellent. Thank you. Really appreciate your thoughts and your effort this morning. And if we can move on, and Stavrola, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your second name. I'm going to let you do that yourself because I don't want to mess it up. But we're going to hear, from Stavrola, in Greece, the experience of working with parents of persons with dual diagnosis. Very interested to hear about that because I think that's a common problem worldwide. So, Stavrola, if you're there and you can share your slides.
Yes, please. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Stavroula Koutsouki. I work as a lead psychologist in the family department of the Koutsouki, the Drug Addiction Center in Greece. Let me try share the tray. I think it's better to use Emmy's help, I think.
It's actually Sari today.
Yes,
there's a double act. So Sari, if you can share Stavroula's,
yes,
you're doing it wonderful. Thank you, Sari.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to express my congratulations to the organizational committee for this rich program. It's so important for all of us to share our experiences and reflect on it. Greetings to everyone that is attending. I'm going to present you the experience of working with parents of adult persons with dual diagnosis. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like to give you a brief profile of the person with the substance use that demands treatment in Greece, according to EMCDDA Statistical Bulletin of 2022. He's male, graduate from secondary school. He's unemployed. He lives, more than half of them live with their family of origin. The majority is self-referral or a referral from families and friends. The mean age of the first use was 20 years old. Next slide, please. There are no official data for persons with dual diagnosis. Next slide. I work in the Drug Addiction Treatment Center of the Koutsouki. It belongs to the public psychiatric hospital. It's a drug-free treatment program for persons with dependence, with internet addiction, drug use, gambling, and eating disorders. It offers an integrated therapy for persons with dual disorders by a multidisciplinary team of psychiatrists, psychologists, substance misuse counselors, art therapists, and social workers. Next slide, please. Concerned and affected family members addressed to the family department independently of their relative with a problem. The vast majority comes first, before the loved one seeks help, hoping to motivate him or her. We work with families in which drug abuse continues, as well as with families where their adult child is under treatment and on follow-up. Our goals are to help our clients to understand the nature of dependence and its treatment, to get awareness of their connectedness to their loved ones for a more self-compassionate approach, to support them for managing stress and strain, to help them to build their resilience against addictive behaviors and their disruption in everyday life, to help them to build a more consistent strategy for motivating their loved ones to seek treatment. Next slide, please. To manage the changes that the treatment brings to their life, to improve family communication. Before a person with duality is involved in the healthcare or social service system, duality's problems are already written into the life stories of those close to him or her. Comorbidity places an additional burden on families. Next slide, please. During May 2021 to May 2022, 38% of concert-affected family members that visited our department reported that their relative had dual disorder. 48% visit a program for substance use for the first time. They refer that their relative is male, live with their family, with dominant diagnosis, the psychosis, 66% of them without any treatment, and 72% have been hospitalized one or more times, most of them involuntary. Dual disorders are generally associated with complex mental, physical, and psychosocial problems and needs, including relapses, violence, legal problems. They have difficulty in maintaining motivation to reduce substance use, and regularly they drop out of treatment. Health professionals describe them as difficult. They believe that the reason for a bad prognosis is non-medical compliance. Half of them believe that family support is the main ingredient for therapy. Next slide, please. 89% of them are parents, married from 50 to 64 years old. The majority of first call was from the mother. The first contact with the family may come during a crisis, such as a symptom relapse, an alcohol or drug binge, an episode of violence, an urgent and involuntary hospitalization. Success in resolving the crisis helps to connect to the family and build a relationship. They seek help because the tense and the stressful family relationships are beyond their resources anymore. Family experience the normal predictive emotional response of shock and denial. They feel distress realizing that there is more than one serious problem. Double the stigma, double the pain. They take extreme measures to secure their home. They wonder, what is it? Mental illness or addiction? 10% of them are referred by the psychiatrist or the hospital. It was the first time that they went for counseling, 20%. The first time they asked for any help was 2 to 5 years after having known the existence of substance use. Parents delay to arrive for professional help. They report experiencing rejection as if they are the one to blame for their diagnosis and the course of illness. They struggle with anger, guilt, and resentment. 35% of them have visited our department before that recent call, but 23% dropped out before. Next slide, please. They're asking information. Most families express a strong interest in learning about mental illness. They don't consider substance use at that time as a priority. They report that they had a difficulty communicating and being heard by the professionals and need extra help. Counseling for managing the unpredictability of behaviors and psychology. With regard to caring, family members report that they are always in standby mode in order to cope with erratic and disruptive behavior, such as aggressive outbursts. They need also support to manage their stress. Parents provide significant amounts of the ongoing day-to-day care and significant psychological and material support. They feel alone and need others with similar experiences. Family members face psychotic breaks, suicide attempts, threats and violence, police intervention, marital breakup and loss of custody. They refer a serious health problem of their own. They refer that they had another relative in their family with substance use. Next slide, please. We would categorize 4 different stages through this process. They are unaware of duality. They have just learned it. They know but can't cope. And the last one, when parents come to assist in their loved one's treatment. Next slide. Thank you. So far, few studies have reported that parents have less time for themselves, are financially distressed. Next slide. Experience stigmatization, depression, and high levels of anxiety, need, and caregiving consequences in all areas. Next slide. This is of particular concern because a carer who is feeling overburdened may provide less effective care. This in turn may exacerbate the patient's symptom and substance use. Next slide. The net result of this strain on the family can be, I'm sorry for the mess over there, can be the loss of family support, leading to housing instability and a more severe course of both disorders. Next slide. Studies have shown that stress derives from isolation, conflicts between family members, insufficient help in caring, exhaustion, and violence. Next slide. Thank you. Clinical experience and research concludes. Family is the motivator and the catalyst for treatment. Next slide. And should be treated with care and provision. And the patients, next slide, when treated, agree to that. Next slide, thank you. The inclusion of families in treatment helps to engage treatment-resistant individuals, promotes treatment adherence and psychiatric stability, reduces relapse, reduces alcohol and illicit drug use, and improves well-being of clients and family members. Next slide. Thank you. Our approach is client-centered, behavioral, and affect-oriented. It's flexible in a here and now setting. The program, the general goal is the stabilization of a drug-free home. The program offers psychoeducation, individual counseling, and supportive group. Our primary focus is on enhancing the motivation of the parents to change by helping them relinquish certain negative parenting behaviors that are strongly related to substance use. The shift to be achieved is from what I have to do to get my child to treatment to how do I want to live, even if my child continues drug use. Next slide. Interventions are tailored to address the personal needs of distressed parents. Family support is organized in the concept of accepting the need for long-term recovery and living a meaningful life despite the limitations. Next slide. Thank you. There are 4 pillars. Psychoeducation on the interactive and cyclical nature of comorbidity, coping strategies for management of substance use, developing positive communication skills, and finally, support, empowerment, focus on self-care and enhancing social support. Family support is consisted of individual meeting between the parent and an experienced psychotherapist. It is designed to be supportive and encouraging for parents. It offers the opportunity to talk freely about their feelings, answering questions, and providing practical information. topics such as anger, frustration, loss, grief, crisis management, and social rehabilitation. Parents are encouraged to join self-help support organizations. We run also support group in order to share feelings and experiences. The growing awareness that you are not alone or the only one gives them compassion and optimism. Next slide. What can we do? We have to be respectful, flexible, and empathetic. As therapists, we all had persons saying that they wanted to change, but then doing whatever to maintain their status quo. The interventions could be highly threatening to them because they require the relinquishing of how parents relate to their loved one. Further exploration of this parents' feeling is needed. Next slide, final one. Where do we go from here? Unfortunately, no outcome research on the efficacy of our interventions has been conducted yet. We are dependent on our clinical experience, creativity, and flexibility to share what we believe is helpful. As such is the present presentation. The door is wide open to opportunities for investigation and extension. It's clear that a diverse array of beliefs and customs exist within this population. In our work, we are further studying to explore creative intervention and strategies to incorporate. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. We can leave the last. Okay, thank you. These are the references. Next, please. And next. Thank you very much for your support, Amy. Thank you. We finished with the slides. I'm back for you.
Deborah, thank you very much, and particularly thank you for the references, because as the presentations will go on the AFINet website, I'm sure people might have been writing down furiously, but they'll be up, and the presentations will be up on the AFINet website after the conference. So thank you very much for that. I know you sparked loads of questions for me. I see a hand raised already. And Steve, you have a question.
Yeah, I actually kind of typed it in there, but then I realized, Ed, you said that you couldn't actually see the chat. But first, I just wanted to comment that, that shift in the focus from how do I get my child into treatment to how do I live the best life for me? I think that's just, that's what drives me to do the work that I do with affected family members. So I was just going to ask what in particular from your experience there that helps the most to create that shift?
It's the whole process, I think, from being heard, first of all, to feel that you are being heard, to validate your feelings and your experiences, and then they can broaden their focus. They can broaden their focus and focus on their self-care. I think it's the whole process that helps them to treat to themselves with respect.
Cool, thanks. So I suppose it's just saying, hey, you're important. That's perhaps it. And then sort of, education, validation, acknowledgement, which again, my previous comment to the previous one is that the parallels between the different models of this work are so, there's so many of them that it's that, destigmatizing, validating the experience and empowering people in terms of their choices and how they respond. So cool, thanks for that. I appreciate your answer.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions before I jump in?
Just to say that Mary Morris has put one in the chat, so I'll read out what she said. The pillars detailed are very helpful, and when working with family members dealing with dual diagnoses, I find supporting the frustration of parents with a lack of comprehensive services that could support their child is the most difficult, dealing with that frustration and supporting them. One parent who is fully engaged in supporting her child explained it as climbing up a hill to get services to understand pre-existing mental health conditions. So I think this thing that you mentioned about professionals and how part of your work is helping people deal with their frustration of dealing with other professionals is so important.
You're right. Yes, yes, I would agree to that. It's like navigate the waves before reaching the family department. They have all these confusing and frustrating experiences from psychiatrists, private ones or public hospitals, and they feel exhausted because of all these waves of dealing with duality.
So obviously it sounds one major task for all of us is not just working with family members, but is training professionals to understand about dealing with family members.
Right, right. And
I
so we include in our interventions training health professionals and the subject is addiction and family. To share my experience, first of all, they came with this concept that parents are responsible for what happens. So how to treat a responsible one? And I mean, we try, and this is the stress strain support, social support model that helped us to base our experience that this is not the case. We are talking about persons that are traumatized too, and we have to take care of them too. It's not motivating just because they are guilt and responsible. And I think it's very important to work with health professional. It tries to make more sensitive, more empathetic to the family too.
I see Candice has her hand up.
Thank you. I'm now confused about what I wanted to ask because I was listening to this really nice conversation now. But I think the challenge, so I'm from South Africa, for those who don't know me. And the challenge that we face here is around, very similar to what you're explaining, is around parents and the stigma around parents and the responsibility, but also parents not thinking that they actually need support for themselves. And the narrative, the response is often, I'm not the one with the problem. So treat the person with the problem and help my child. If he's okay, everything's going to be okay. And so I'm just wondering about your thoughts around, or just your experience around creating that awareness that it's okay for you to get support. And it's actually important for you to get support when people don't recognize that support for them is available, but also necessary in terms of, family health. And then, just thoughts around spaces where, for people who are not in treatment. And how do you create that kind of support for people who are not in treatment? Because often we are able to access the family within the treatment centers through the person who has a substance use problem, right? But for people who are not seeking treatment but really need support within the family, just some thoughts around that from anybody, because I think that's the challenge on our side, which I'm sure everybody else shares probably as well. Yeah, just that for now. Thank you.
I can't help thinking your question is going to lead us into Sheila's conversation about how we move from awareness to advocacy, policy to practice. Just one final comment, Trevor, and I really liked the theme of real trauma-based work. Shifting from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you, and I think that's a message we all can take on, because your clientele just have. I think what I heard most is the unpredictability that they live with. When you look at the quite even spread between the violence, the unpredictability, the stress. And I think that leaves a really good question, Candice. How do we increase that not just awareness that helps there, but that motivation that I'm going to get involved. I'm going to take that step to reach out for help. So if we could move on, Sheila, introduce yourself. I'll let you tell a little bit about where you work. You're going to talk to us about creating awareness through advocacy, policy, practice. Keen to add this, really keen to hear what you say, because if you're down I take it in Dublin direction, and I'm only up here in the north, so I think what you have to say has a lot to do with us here in the island of Ireland. So really keen to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. Delighted to be here, Ed. Can I just check, are my slides coming up there on the screen for everybody?
They are.
Yes, they are.
You're on full. You're on full. You're not on full presentation mode at the moment.
I'll go to that now. Thank you. At least I hope I will. Okay, so firstly, thanks very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I wanted just to give a little bit of information, a wee bit of background on Alcohol Action Ireland, which is the body that I would work with. So we're an independent advocate for reducing alcohol harm. We have a number of goals that we're working towards in our current strategic plan, and I've just highlighted one there in particular, that we really strongly advocate for a childhood free from alcohol harm. Now, sadly, it'll probably come as no surprise to anybody that we do have very significant harms from alcohol in Ireland, and there are various measures for this. Just highlighted a few there in terms of the levels of alcohol use disorder, the costs that is to society. But obviously here, I really want to focus on the harm and the cost that is to families and what we might actually be able to do about it. So even though I've highlighted that we do have this level of harm in Ireland from alcohol use, a very hidden aspect of that harm is, the harm that's been caused to families, to children who are being brought up in homes that are very much impacted by alcohol. So back in 2019, there were 3 individuals who came together with us in Alcohol Action Ireland to form an initiative that we know as Silent Voices. And they were Carol, Marion and Barbara. And all 3 of those women had lived experience. And I'm actually very pleased that Marion is here with us today. So the aim and object, I suppose, of Silent Voices was first and foremost to raise awareness of the issue, because this, even though it is a widespread issue affecting, perhaps 1 in 6 children, upwards of 400,000 adults who are living with the consequences and with the trauma of having grown up in a home in that particular way, there's actually very little discussion of this, whether it's in the media or indeed within health services or social services. What we aim to do is to put forward some policy solutions that could help to address the issues. And very much what we're trying to do is to work to a whole of government approach, and for ourselves to work in partnership with other individuals and with organisations who have interests in this area. Very specifically, I suppose what we want to do is to be able to recognise those very particular needs that occur for both the children and for the adults at a later date. We want to embed that whole concept of trauma-informed services. This is why I was very interested in what we were talking about earlier, about asking, what happened to you as opposed to what's wrong with you. Because I think if we can get that type of language, embedded between various agencies and various departments, I think, and we can share, I suppose, the common language and understanding, we will have some hope of really being able to address the issues that are arising. So a little bit of background on where we are from a policy framework perspective. So in Ireland, I suppose primarily the approach to alcohol problems is being addressed through a big policy document, Reducing Harm, Supporting Recovery, which takes a health-led response to drug and alcohol problems. And then within the Department of Children, there are, particular policy documents there, Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, the first 5. And again, they would emphasize, that there is a need to look at children in the round and to look at the various departments that would be there. More recently than 2019, there was a joint initiative came from the Health Service Executive and TUSLA, which is the Child and Family Agency, to try and take an integrated approach to children who were experiencing hidden harm. And then more recently again, within the Council of Europe, we have been very impressed actually with some of the work that's coming out through the Pompidou group there, who've been putting forward a number of reports and proposals. And actually Ireland has been involved in some of those reports. So when you look at these various policies and reports, there's a lot of good stuff that is being at least suggested. But sadly, I would say there is actually a lack of progress. And definitely one of the things that we're very keen to see is, when we look to other countries, for example, we can see in Scotland and Wales, we can see that the adverse childhood experience movement is much stronger there, and is certainly from more, I would say, sort of the government approach is much stronger there, of actually trying to embed that and embed the ACE experience within government policy. So I will say that all of the work of Silent Voices is very much informed by the voice of the lived experience. One of the first things that this initiative did was to open up a platform on our website whereby people could share their stories anonymously. And we really, really do look at those stories ourselves. Obviously, we put them out on social media. We've animated some of the stories, just to get them out there. But we did a piece of research actually with colleagues in University College Cork in the Department of Applied Psychology there, to actually try to analyse the stories themselves. There's about 40 of them at the moment that have been shared with us. And what we wanted to do was to look at some of the themes that came from that. So we've published that work, and you can see the various papers and different documents on our website around that. And we were very pleased actually that some of the results from that study was recently highlighted by the Special Rapporteur on Child Protection in his annual report. So that this is a person who's charged from a government perspective of looking at various issues around child protection. One of the a big theme that actually emerged for us in that, in looking at those stories, was the number of times education came up. We would have had people saying things like, people in school knew, teachers knew, but nothing happened. Nobody ever did anything, and that led us actually to develop a detailed paper around some of those education issues. We ourselves have provided some input into professional development courses with a number of teacher organisations. Last year we held a very big event actually with colleagues at Maynooth University on trauma-informed education, and there was actually over 1,000 attended, and some of the resources from that event have now been accessed over 23,000 times. And I think to me that really points to a desire, a need, within many different groups of people who are looking for more resources. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment with our colleagues in Maynooth is to develop a website with resources around trauma-informed good practice. Another key area for us to try and advocate in is around therapeutic support, and we've had a number of projects underway there. One of our founding voices, Barbara Whelan, gave a really lovely talk actually with another colleague on compassion focused therapy. And there's a recording of that on our website, and I find myself actually just looking at that, really it points to many of the difficulties that adults who have grown up with this problem experience at a later time, and how to be more gentle, I suppose, on yourself. And so that's something that we're actually looking to develop a little bit further as well. In our work, what we've tried to do is to work closely with professional therapy organisations. And a couple of years back ago, we held a very big training event on some of the issues around addiction and the impact on families, and over 800 attended that. And again, those resources from that have often been downloaded. Another thing that we've been doing, and actually, as I say, Marion is with us, is to develop some podcasts for use for therapists. So this is sometimes being therapist talking to therapist, or people talking a little bit further about their own experience. But the idea really is to give those who are perhaps new to the field a bit more information about that. So for ourselves, the kind of advocacy work that we do, well, I have to say that we draw up a lot of submissions to various government consultations. And I'd really like to thank my colleague Jennifer Howe, who's also with us today, for the detailed work that actually goes into that. Because we do find the more that we keep putting these things in, using this similar sort of language around trauma, around the ACEs, and trying to share these with other organisations who are putting in similar submissions to get similar language, all of these things really do help. We've held a number of workshops, and indeed, Ed, you were at one of our first workshops there that, helped us to really develop our thinking around the issues. And from that, we have developed a manifesto of the strategic actions that we see needed. And that's the kind of thing that we can bring to government ministers and to policy makers. And indeed, we have been doing that over the last number of years. And of course, alongside of all of this is trying to get the issue raised in the media as well. And we feel we have been successful on that, with over 150 items in national and regional media, and of course within our own social medias as well. So some of the organisations that we've worked for, I've just listed them out there, and I really want to thank them because, we're a very small organisation ourselves. There's only 3 of us in our own office. So we certainly couldn't do things on our own, but by linking with other bodies, other organisations, other advocates, we think we can make some progress on this issue. And certainly we have been heartened, when we look at some of the progress that has been made. Something that we're working on right now at the moment is a thing called Operation Encompass. And, this is a programme that we saw in operation in the UK. It's actually come to Northern Ireland as well. Ed, I think you'll probably be familiar with it there. It's a data sharing programme. The basic idea is that if the police were to attend a family home for whatever reason, that by the following morning, if there were children in that household, that the schools of those children would be informed that there was a situation the night before. And the idea is that the child, on going into school, is met with immediate support, a bit of kindness, a bit of understanding that maybe the homework hasn't been done, or whatever else that might actually construe from that they're not met with further trauma, further difficulties, further given out to, or whatever, and stuff like that. So we've been working very hard on that, and indeed we were pleased to see that in the latest national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, which was just published there in the summertime, that there's an action point around Operation Encompass to at least examine it, and we're pushing very hard on that. Actually, that particular strategy, we would have put a lot of emphasis and a lot of work in our own submission to it, and we were pleased to see that at least children were included within it. We were disappointed, however, to notice that there was absolutely no mention of the role of alcohol in such violence. And while we're always very much at pains to point out that we recognise that domestic violence is not caused by alcohol, we know that it is a significant factor, and we're certainly very disappointed that there is no recognition of that within that strategy. So we'll continue to work and continue to kind of build up support with other organisations on that. Another project that we're working on right now, just going back to that idea of compassion-focused therapy, we are hoping to put together an 8-week course, a group course on mindfulness that really takes the compassion focus at its core, and we hope to be able to evaluate such a course. And the idea really is to see, would that be something that could be shared, could be rolled out in other arenas as well. We're aware that there are very many therapists who do encounter obviously people who have experienced this particular difficulty, but we know that there is an absence of ongoing long-term support of what else might be there. So a few other things that are coming up for us. We have a very busy week coming in October. We have our National Awareness Week. It's a campaign we call End the Silence. So we have 5 days of various events and activities that are going on. In fact, actually the first, we'll be kicking off with a piece of research that we've done again with colleagues in UCC, which looked at professionals, mental health professionals, and try to get a handle on, well, how much knowledge and training did they get around this very particular adverse childhood experiences. We We have a couple of online events. Again, we're linking in with other organisations. And another thing that we plan to do is to have is to launch a dedicated toolkit, which includes resources for children, for adult children, and professionals who could be working in this area. Hope to have another podcast out, and again a bit more about some of the I suppose not just the research, but the types of programs that can be of help. And we'll have some colleagues, I think, coming down from the north as well on the Steps to Cope programme. So that's what we're about. I've given some contact details for our organisations. Delighted to take any questions, or indeed if people wanted to get in touch afterwards, very, very happy to chat more about our work. And I really want to thank all of AFINet for their help and support in getting us to this event today. Thank you.
Sheila, thank you very much for that presentation, and I'm delighted to hear just how much it was a couple of years ago when we linked in and it was down with you, but you've certainly moved on. And I see there's some questions. Richard, you have the first one.
Yeah, wow, is what I want to say. Sheila, that was absolutely fantastic. I think this is an amazing template of what can be done. We've been talking for ages about how we get things moving and how we get things changed in policy and how we move research into practice. And it seems to me that you have listed in this 15-20 minutes about a million things that we could do. I'm just so absolutely, completely impressed. The huge number of resources which you are sharing on your website, the advice about how you've managed to move things forward. And obviously, I know you recognize there's a long way to go, but what you've done so far, the tactic of repeated submissions, the tactic of repeated use of common language and getting other people to use the same language, the realization of how to use the voice of lived experience and how powerful that is, and how politicians and policymakers actually listen to lived experience, perhaps even more than they do to research. The idea of helping people to realize, you didn't use this expression, I don't think, but it's something that clicks with me, small acts of kindness. You were talking about what teachers might do. And it's funny that Lorna and I have just finished writing a chapter where we've been commenting about small acts of kindness and how important they are. It just everything. So I just wanted to say, I haven't got a question. Well, actually, I have, but I wanted to say marvelous. My question, I suppose, was one question early on about education and what you were doing within education. And it seems to me that in education, as with everything else, one of the issues is about helping people identify family members, whether they're children or adults. But one of the problems with identification is that if people identify, they need to know what to do. And if they don't know what to do, then it's in their interest not to identify. So I wonder, in a sense, what advice are you giving? What help are you giving teachers and people in education? If they do identify, what should they do about it?
That is a very good point, and it's certainly something that it has been discussed, and we've seen this being discussed ourselves. We certainly think that within the school situation, we have to recognise that teachers cannot be all things to all people at all times, and we're very aware that the resources of individual teachers is very stretched. So within the school context, possibly the most that maybe is achievable there from individual teachers is a bit of support, a bit of understanding. What we really would be pushing for is better therapeutic supports outside of school, linked with school, but outside the education thing. And the fact we've been pushing for a trauma-informed framework for education. So some of the things, for example, that we would be putting forward is the need for psychological services to be available to schools, whether that's through psychologists being available, or whether it's through specific programs that are running elsewhere that can be linked. But we do recognise that you can't expect teachers to be able to do everything. You can't expect people to be teaching maths on one hand and also providing some kind of support, because they won't be able to do it, and they won't be able to. It in itself can cause more difficulties. But I think you have to start somewhere. So certainly at least a bit of support, a bit of understanding, that you don't add to the problems, and kind of giving some sort of understandings of what can be done. And this is actually one of the things where I'm very impressed with Operation Encompass and its work in the UK, that does provide, you know, a training that's appropriate for teachers and appropriate for what they might be able to do.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Marion, you have your hand up. I'm sure you're keen to come in. You're muted.
Thank you, Ed and Richard. And just Sheila has so well represented the work that we've been doing for the last 3 years. And, you know, I suppose my own experience, having worked in the alcohol field all my life, and this towards the end of my career, considering actually coming out about the lived experience, and having 2 other adult colleagues joining me in that, and together we find great strength in combining our experiences and in considering with our various backgrounds the kind of actions, key actions that can be developed. But with the support of Alcohol Action Ireland and Sheila, I think it's really taking us places we didn't imagine we could go. So we're looking forward to really strong further advocacy in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And Sheila, again, congratulations. Well done. COVID might have stopped a lot of things, but certainly didn't stop yourselves. And one of the things I'm keen to say, we're just in the process of negotiating training dates for Steps to Cope down in the southeastern area around Naas and Donegal. So we'll be involved in it. So expect an email from me. I'm keen to catch up and link back in with you.
I live in Naas, so it'd be delighted to see you, Ed. Yeah.
There's a comment here, Ed, from Mary Morris. We've run a SHARP group in post-primary schools at the moment, and it's going well. The teachers really responded to the resources and the messages. So that's very good to hear that things are moving in other places and other countries as well.
That is excellent. So just on behalf of everyone, can I really thank our presenters, Annette, Servola, and Sheila, for 3 excellent presentations. And you've all put resources and ideas on the table that certainly can be followed up on the AFINet website. Thank you.
Okay.